Greetings, this is me, Kyle, from How to Defeat a Narcissist. And we always use the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni saga, trial, conflict. We always use this case as an example of narcissistic behavior patterns and how to foresee them and how to navigate through them. And I was looking today at Ashley Briana Eve, and she had a short in which she was examining Ryan Reynolds' SEO implementation and how every time you search his name, nothing but positive things come up. And she's saying, God, that's kind of funny given that we have all of this negative press around It Ends With Us. And she was basically using her PR background to analyze. But she made some suggestion that quite possibly there's some self-sabotaging behavior going on in Blake Lively's team.
I am now more convinced than ever that someone, maybe her husband, has it out for her and is sabotaging her success and is sabotaging her PR. Blake, I'd be careful. I'd be careful. You think you need to worry about the content creators? I think you need to worry about your own team. Allegedly, my opinion only.
Meaning that there are things that are being done that is jeopardizing her career. It's going to be hard for me to imagine Blake Lively at 37 really having a career after this whole thing is over. I mean, given the reputation that she has created for herself and all the bad publicity and all the difficulty, it's like she's like a Tasmanian devil. Everywhere she goes, she creates doom. She creates conflict. She creates chaos, allegedly, and that's what's been reported. But a light bulb came off in my head when she made that statement because I've seen that pattern as well. I'm like, this is not looking good for Blake Lively, but Ryan Reynolds, on the other hand, oh my God, he is not even feeling any of the negative publicity that is taking place, even though he continues to try to put his name into the case. Once again, it had me thinking that Ryan Reynolds is responsible, or he's basically the driver behind this ship. This is what I'm thinking. This is my speculation. I have no idea what the real truth is. And then that's where I got this idea. How could Blake Lively resurrect her career? Is it possible for Blake Lively to resurrect her career? And I got this one idea. There's only one path that would possibly work for Blake Lively to resurrect her career. And that's to divorce Ryan Reynolds. Not only divorce Ryan Reynolds, but also be fully transparent in the psychological manipulation that she was under while she was married to Ryan Reynolds. This is just a byline. I have no idea if it's true, but this is how I'm thinking. And so now when it comes to psychological abuse, like we all are aware of physical abuse, sexual abuse, family abuse. We see all these abuses in front of our faces that creates trauma for the individual who receives this energy. We see that all the time. But we rarely talk about psychological abuse. I wouldn't call myself a victim. I would say I'm a victor of psychological abuse. I dealt with it with my mother, and I have grown, learned, and become a better person because of it. Now, there was a painful, and I had a lot of tragedies, trauma, self-sabotaging myself to get to this point, and I'm still still moving forward. I still, what do they call that? You're always an alcoholic. You're just always a recovering alcoholic. Well, I'm a recovering victor. I'm becoming more victorious as I understand the depth of self. But I've strayed from the point. Let's steer the steering wheel back to the psychological manipulation that I believe Blake Lively is under. Like, I believe this whole entire case was let's influence Blake Lively with her somewhat insecure perspective that's been reported. I mean, we all seen the Taylor Swift thing that came out yesterday and how Taylor Swift says, oh, no, you can't live in a world where you're constantly looking at the negative and you think about that all day. You know, this is what was reported yesterday. And so Blake Lively is 37, going on 38. She's a millennial. And what is the pattern that happened to millennials as they grew up? The pattern of millennials is that everything that you said to them as they were growing up was just positive. You're just beautiful. You're perfect. You can do anything. There's nothing that you can't be. All of those positive reinforcements, those are great. But when mistakes happen, when there's wrong turns, when there's things that you do that causes harm to others, it causes harm to yourself, you can't follow that up and say, oh, you're still great, no matter what. Don't listen to those people. See, what happens is that over time, if you constantly have nothing but positive reinforcement, then the muscles that allow you to take negative criticism, constructive criticism, that just a friend telling you, you know what, I think you could have done better if you did that, those muscles aren't developed. So as you become a grown person and been dealing with positive reinforcement 24/7 all your life, then the way you see the world is only through that lens. Now, see, I come from the opposite generation, the generation where your flaws were always on display, always discussed. You got to overcome this. You can't be better at this. I played sports, and my coaches would always have me work on my liabilities of my game, my weaknesses in my game. Be aware of my weakness and work on my weakness and make my weakness a positive. That's the coaching that I had growing up. Kelsey said, she's an athlete, you gotta coach her. That's the mindset of an athlete. You gotta be aware of your flaws and be aware to maybe hide them a little bit during the competition or work on them so they don't become a liability. Well, not only was that in sports for me, that was my parents, that was the culture. They always magnified your flaws, let you know about your flaws, and in many cases, they may indirectly help you address your flaws and become a better person. So that's our generation that I come from. And the millennials come from the opposite. I'm generation, what, X? Yeah, X. Right after the baby boomers, I'm on that cusp or that in between, you know. So yeah, millennials were raised a little bit different. You know, they're the ones that receive the participation trophies. Like, hey, you didn't win, but you won anyways. Yeah, that mentality. Well, what happens over time, and you can tell Blake was a pretty girl. She's a pretty woman, pretty on the outside, but may not be pretty on the inside. And we as men, we're flawed by the external beauty. Once again, let me divert back to the right road. If you grow up like that all the time, then your muscles to deal with negativity is not developed. So if you know this about your partner, And if you know this about somebody, it's not too difficult to press their buttons, to get them to react. So this is my speculation. Ryan Reynolds, along with the publicist Stephanie Jones, they press Blake Lively's negative buttons. If you listen to what Taylor Swift said, and if she's throwing shade on Blake Lively, you can hear the possibility that Blake Lively lives in constantly listening and reminding herself about those negative reactions from others. And that's the opposite of what narcissists really love. They love validation. They always want to see positive praise. And it's very difficult for them to actually have constructive criticism or negative feedback. So if you're dealing with somebody like that, you can easily press their buttons and get them to project their behavior that caused negative reactions, project it to somebody else and get them to be constantly thinking it. It's not very hard for, a narcissist to project. It's not very hard to push a narcissist to project, because kryptonite is looking at themselves in the mirror and seeing who they really are. That's their kryptonite. So it's not very hard. So all you got to do is give them a little fuel about how this person, in this case, Baldoni, he's the one that's responsible for all of this negative things that you're dealing with. And you want to remove the negativity by removing him instead of removing it by looking at yourself. So now let's get back to how does Blake Lively resurrect her career? She talks about that psychological manipulation. She talks about that psychological motivation by her husband, allegedly. She becomes fully transparent. She starts to really do the work within herself. She sees her mistakes. She grows from it. And now she's fully expressive of the demonizing behavior of the boogeyman Ryan Reynolds, allegedly. I'm just throwing out the character of Ryan Reynolds and how he's portrayed in certain parts of the media. You portray him as the bad boogeyman, and you were under his terrorism. He was terrorizing you, and you become fully transparent of that experience. Now, how would that be beneficial? Well, we live in a culture that loves to hate men and loves to blame men. We don't want to blame the behavior of what certain men will do. We want to just blame men. So easily just say, hey, he's a man, he's bad, and I'm the woman. That's very easily for us to drive. We can drive that road in our society very well. And then if she starts to express some of the details of how she was psychologically manipulated under his terrorism, then she can start teaching others, how to avoid or see it. She talks about how she met him when she was about 24. Was that right? She's very young, and, how he did ABC, become fully transparent. In fact, maybe she might do a biography, a book, or something in that nature. But that would be the narrative that she would need to do to now maybe put blame where blame is due, take responsibility, because nobody can drive your ship without your permission, and be fully transparent and tell that story. She would gain some sympathy. She would show that she's maturing and becoming a better person. And then now you do PR around that story, around that narrative. Quite possibly, if that's done very well, then Blake Lively can resurrect her career. Think about it. Would you buy that narrative? Would you buy that PR? Of course, it has to be genuine, but she's an actress. Maybe she can act that part because she's acting the part now where she's been, abused by Baldoni. I was going to say abused by Lively, because that's really what it is. She's self-sabotaging herself, but maybe she's got the nutrients, the water, the attention being given by somebody else that's pushing her in that direction, and she doesn't need much of a nudge. That quite possibly, I would believe that. We all love a comeback story. We all love a retribution. We all love, because that's life. How many of us have made terrible mistakes and wow, it was the mistakes that was really the blessing, because now we're a better person. But if we don't take it as a blessing, if we don't rewrite our own script and say, wow, that was so beneficial for me. It was painful. I don't want to go through it again, but wow, that was really beneficial. We love that story. And I believe we would love that story with Blake Lively. What do you think? Share your perspective. And again, I don't care if you like, I don't care if if you don't like it, or I don't care if you even make the subscription. I'm trying to get it out of my head. But I do care in what you think. Share your thoughts.